Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Considered. Tonight, I want to speak to you about homelessness. I don't want to talk about the problems of homelessness. I don't want to talk about how it's destroying Seattle. I don't want to talk about how it's destroying the homeless. I want to talk about what causes homelessness. There's no one particular reason for homelessness. It's a combination of a whole bunch of different reasons. And sometimes there's people that are homeless that experience all of those reasons at one time. There's other people that experience homelessness because they have went through certain situations in their life. For me, when I was homeless, it was a combination of a few things. Now, in order to understand what caused my homelessness, I want to go back to the beginning. When I was a kid, very young, me and my sister were put up for adoption. And at that time, I was very young. I was 5 going on 6. My sister was 2 going on 3. We were put into foster care, and from that, we were given 2 different families to choose from, and that responsibility was put on my shoulders. And upon doing so, I picked a family for a very selfish reason. One family lived on a farm in a double wide or in a single wide trailer actually, lived on a farm, and I didn't like that. I thought the farm was very boring. So the other family had a large house, lived in the city. There were loads and loads of kids all around for me and my sister to play with. And based on that, I chose that family as our mom and dad. That's the family we wanted. Now, upon making that decision, within that first year, there were some issues that happened on my mother's side that adversely affected me. I don't want to go into the great details of them, but I was severely hurt. And upon that, I lost a little bit of faith in the family, so to speak. But I was very young, and I assumed that's just what happens. As I grew older, it started happening more. And I was afraid to go to mom and dad with it because I was afraid that they would no longer want me and my sister. And my sister finally had a mom and dad, finally had a family. So I decided to get away from the house as quickly as possible. And I found a group home that I wanted to go to. It was just far enough away from mom and dad and my dad's grandparents to where I could function properly, work through my issues, and also still be in contact with the family. Well, over time, you get the impression that you're not wanted. So when you're not wanted, you decide sometimes not to deal with the people that make you feel not wanted. So I quit dealing with my family for a very long time, which was kind of stupid on my part, but I was young, impressionable, and dumb, and I decided to move around a lot. That was the first phase of my homelessness issue. I figured if I'm not wanted, I'm going to go where I'm wanted. So I moved around a lot, and when I went from city to city, I stayed at homeless shelters, and that was a way for me to get around and have a place to stay. Then I met my son's mother, and my son's mother and I had my son William. At that time, we had talked about maybe getting married, but it didn't work out. She met somebody else that she fell in love with, and she wanted him and her to raise my son. And I was told that I could no longer be around my son So my center was splintered. I talked about that in another video. My center was splintered, and I was tossed at sea. My moral compass was shot. I was moving in all sorts of directions, and I was hurt. And I was both mentally and physically hurt. So I moved around and I started living homeless. I lived in Topeka, Kansas. I stayed at a shelter there. I lived in Los Angeles. I stayed in shelters in Los Angeles. I stayed outside when I was in Los Angeles when the shelters were full. So I had a long period of time where I was moving from place to place, and I felt I was lonely. And being homeless and staying at the shelter afforded me the ability to not be lonely anymore because I had people to talk to, and I had people to hang around with and pal around with and do stuff with. But I was still being tossed at sea. So from there, I ended up moving to Seattle, and that's when I fell in love with the city of Seattle. At that time, when I first moved to Seattle, I had nothing, nowhere. So once that happened and I got into Seattle, I started to hook up with various things that could help me move into Seattle and that could help me solidify my residence, so to speak. Originally, I was going from Everett, Washington, down to Los Angeles on a Greyhound, and I had a layover in Seattle. And once the layover in Seattle happened, which I don't understand why there was a layover, but there was, I fell in love with Seattle. I walked around looking for a place to eat, and I was walking around, and I bumped into several places that I fell in love with. And I decided that's where I wanted to make my home, was in Seattle. Then, once I got into Seattle, I started working for a few different places. The Downtown Emergency Service Center was one of those places, down by Pike, down by, not Pike, but down by Pioneer Square. And then I met a girl on the internet. I met a woman, thought I was in love, so I was still young. I thought I was in love, and I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, which was a huge mistake because it didn't work out. You ever bought a pair of shoes that you thought were perfect for you, but they were too small for your feet, but you were bound and determined to get your foot in that shoe because it was the only pair left, and you didn't know that there was more coming? So you bought that pair of shoes, and you were tried to put your foot in that shoe. Well, that's what I was doing with this relationship. Anyway, I moved to Minneapolis. But upon moving to Minneapolis, it was one of the greater things for my life because it allowed me the ability to get grounded, to get an apartment, get used to living in an apartment, paying bills, growing up quite a bit. She ended up marrying her ex-boyfriend, by the way, and I was left high and dry, but at that time I was on a roll. So I used the time to be productive of myself. So I decided that I want to move back to Seattle. And what better time to do it than now? So in the beginning of 2021, at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, I am going to be moving back to Seattle. And I plan on putting my hat in the ring for the 2025 mayoral election in Seattle. I'm going to start big because I think Seattle deserves better than what they're getting. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what caused my homelessness. For others, it could be drug problems. For others, it could be they lost their job or they just lost their apartment. But everybody's story is important because it dictates how they can best be helped get out of the situation they're in. If you just like being homeless, that's going to be okay for you, but it cannot happen in Seattle. It will not work for you there. I plan on fixing the homeless problem and at least get it down to a minimal roar. I want it to be a purr instead of a bark. So, having said that, if you have been homeless in your life, or if you know somebody that has, put a comment below, like right down there. Um, I would love to talk to you more about that, because the more we talk, the better we can understand the problem and the best way to go about fixing it. If you have another idea for a video that you'd like me to do, please put it in the comments below. I would love to hear from you about it. Also, hit the thumbs up. I can't do this without you. Um, Hit the subscribe button as well. Let's make tomorrow better than yesterday by doing the very best we can today. This has been All Things Considered. Have a good night, Seattle, America, and all points beyond.